for about over 20 years at the state capitol with different advocacy organizations, foundations, and Conservation Colorado is really at this sweet spot of the intersection of policy and politics. And we focus on climate, lands, water, and equity and justice issues.
And full disclosure, I am on Kelly's board, but I'll try not to play favorites here. Jon, would you like to talk about your work with WRA? You're on mute.
Thanks, Sue. My name is Jon Goldin-Dubois. I'm the president of Western Resource Advocates. And thanks so much to the Community Foundation for hosting us and to all of you for joining. Western Resource Advocates works across 7 states in the West to protect land, air, and water so that we have vibrant communities that are in balance with nature. And our team is based in Boulder, but also in 7 other offices around the region. And we work on climate change to ensure we have a zero carbon electricity grid. We work to protect rivers across the West and ensure the Colorado River flows to the sea. We are working to protect half of Western landscapes and to ensure that all of our communities have clean air and clean water.
Awesome, thanks, Jon. I do understand that Jeff Hirota has now joined us and would like to do a quick welcome. So Jeff, if your voice is there somewhere, jump in. Or Brooke, if you can promote him. There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and I really apologize. I was locked out of the webinar through our stringent security system, which it's good to keep riffraff out of the webinar if you can. I can't actually see myself right now, but I wanted to thank all of you for gathering, and I again apologize for joining late. Especially wanted to thank our honored panelists. And I wonder, Sue, if it would be too late for me to say what I would have said by way of welcome, or if we are off and running at this point.
We're about to be off and running, so have at it.
Have at it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is now completely out of context, but what I had hoped to do was to begin with just a moment of quiet. And I promise this will take only about 30 seconds. If we could, I'm just going to read a few words from farmer and poet Wendell Berry. Would that be okay, Sue?
Sure, do it.
Okay. This is from the piece of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Welcome, everyone, and I'll now move into the group with you and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. It certainly is an unusual time, and I do hope that everybody is well and safe in these times. So with that, I think we'll move into a few questions. We have about 5 questions for our panelists to sort of hash through and discuss and point and counterpoint. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one, which is, at the federal level, as I think we all know, and in some states, not necessarily here in Colorado, and at the local level, environmental regulations have been rolled back. A lot of agencies have been decimated and hollowed out. Science is denied. And many communities have been pushed to the edge more than ever. And I think this pandemic certainly shows us that in lots of different ways. So where do you think that the conservation movement should be focusing its attention in this moment in time? Anybody who wants to start, go for it. And I would just suggest the three of you go off mute and just start talking. We'll go for this question, and then timing wise, I'll move us on to the second round when it's time.
So Peggy, I think you teed up really well, sort of, my own personal opinion, and I think where Patagonia is going. I mean, the most important thing for all of us to do is to vote. And the way you teed it up for us is that on the federal level, we're seeing lots of rollbacks. We're seeing administration is taking advantage of our distraction over the pandemic to take care of a few rollbacks. And then you mentioned in Colorado, we elected a pro-conservation slate, really. And we're rewriting our regulations on how we do oil and gas in the state. The priority now is human health and health of the environment rather than promoting the oil and gas industry. And the difference there is voting. We elected a pro-conservation slate and the nation did not. So that's where I think our energies are best spent.
Yeah. Well, of course, coming from the political organization, I would echo what Mark said, and I love to see a leader like Mark and the company saying that they've really been at the forefront, and I hope others follow where they have led. I'd say three things: elections, climate, and equity. First, on elections, as Mark talked about, leadership matters. It's devastatingly sad to say that it's a matter of life and death. And we have to elect leaders who believe in science, who value the health of humans and communities and our environment, and who actually are interested in others more than themselves. So elections matter. Climate, after we deal with Corona, climate change will still be looming, and we now we know what it means, really, to have denied science, to have disregarded how pollution brings more death, what it means when entire communities and countries and regions of the world are destabilized. This is a preview, and it ain't pretty, and we cannot say we did not know. We are watching firsthand. And then the third thing, sadly, that we're also getting a preview of is why equity and justice matters and what it means to be a disproportionately impacted community. We use those words, but I don't think we actually often stop and think about what they mean. And we have seen firsthand how the lives of people of color and poor people are many times worse, 3 to 6 times worse. In times of crisis, and we cannot pretend any longer that we do not have that upfront knowledge. And so for us, elections, climate, and equity remains our focus. And this virus has only brought that into sharper relief.
I'd say you can't argue with anything that either Mark or Kelly said. Elections matter, climate matters, equity matters, all of those things, I think, have to be an increasing focus for the conservation community writ large. I think of, as a policy-based organization, I think of 2 specific areas to engage in where we're engaging. First, defense. We have to do everything we can to stop the attacks on our environment, particularly those in this time that are kind of under the cover of COVID. The administration continues to chip away at some of the most important environmental policies and protections that we've had, like the National Environmental Policy Act, rollback of clean car standards, which would mean dirtier air in our cities, more impact on people of color and lower income people, and also more climate warming pollution. So we have to enforce those laws that protect nature, that protect the places that we love, and that protect our communities. I think that's the first thing that I think about in that important role for defense. But I also think there is a tremendous opportunity for us to be on offense. And we've shown that in the last few years, even while Trump has been in office. We've made tremendous progress across states here in the West, in particular on climate, where Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada have all passed nation-leading climate legislation, and even some states that aren't considered to be blue or even purple, like Arizona and Utah, where there are huge opportunities to cut carbon emissions, limit climate impacts, and to do that even in this environment. So I think of this as really focus on both those things: defense where we have to, and offense where there are opportunities.
So it sounds to me like a lot of what you're saying, and I think this is true in many movements, is that the work is really at the states at this point, or at the local level where that's possible. But I mean, I think it is an interesting question to sort of figure out what progress can we make at the federal level in this administration, which sort of leads me into the next question, which is sort of related to what you've all said, is that how is your work, both your strategies as well as your tactics, and I don't mean just having your staff work from home, but how has it changed in the time of the pandemic? Message content, all of those kinds of things, and part of that is because at the federal level, I think it's really hard to figure out what do you do to deal with this administration. But let's talk about that. What's changed? What's different? How are you pivoting? How are you adapting?
Well, from our perspective, a lot of the advocacy in the states is able to continue. So if you look at most of the regulatory bodies where decisions about climate are made, where decisions about oil and gas are made, where decisions about air quality are made, a lot of those forums continue to meet on the same schedules that they'd established before. So I think a lot of that really critical regulatory work can still be done. So from our perspective, we're still focused on creating really good policy that ensures that science is recognized, that we reduce carbon emissions consistent with that, that we take action to protect human health and the environment. I think that's that's the stuff that has in a lot of ways stayed the same, even though the forum is electronic as opposed to in person. I think there actually are some tremendous federal opportunities with the upcoming and likely stimulus packages that are coming out of DC. All reports are that when they really get to that final stimulus package, it's likely to dwarf the 2008 package, which was the largest package ever in history. And so there are going to be billions and trillions of dollars that are on the table. And so I think the question is whether or not we're able to direct those resources to an economy of the future. And how do we direct those resources into things like a clean power grid? How do we direct those resources into clean cars and the build out of an electronic transportation system? So I think there are opportunities, but that's all made more difficult by the pandemic. And obviously there are people in crisis, and those issues have to be dealt with at the same time. But I think the real thing is, how do we ensure that we don't allow climate to be the same kind of acute crisis that COVID is today?
Yeah, I'll just build on some of what Jon said, because I would agree the work, our goals, our strategies, those have not changed. I just went through with my team our entire strategic plan and annual plan, and very little of that has changed. The tactics have changed, how we reach people, how they engage. I think there's a massive amount of innovation happening on that front, digital and other tools. So we're taking very seriously the how and the tactical side of it. We're building 2 election plans, one with and one without social distancing, that has serious repercussions for some of our most effective tools like canvassing, like same-day voter registration and voting. Luckily, we have the best voting system in the country of any state, hands down. So we are very lucky with that in Colorado, but that does not mean that we aren't building two plans for Election Day. I think two other things I would say. One is that we are trying to make sure that we always take partnership really seriously, and we do a lot of convening, we do a lot of coalition work, we lead a lot of groups of our peers and non-traditional coalition partners, and we're trying to take very seriously that we need those same cast of characters when we come out of this, and we've been lucky to have a stable organization built by great board members like Sue, and we are not facing layoffs, but we're trying to do what we can to reach out to our peers and support them however we can. I think the second thing is what Jon said, that is the opportunity to be different, which is rebuilding better. We've got to, as an advocacy community and as leaders like the Environmental Affinity Group, we've got to look to our leaders with an expectation of rebuilding better. We cannot just say we're going to rebuild. We have to be raising the bar to rebuild better. And by that, I mean things like a carbon neutral economy, investing in our best assets in Colorado, which is our natural environment. The outdoor rec industry is our #1 economy in the state. So how are we rebuilding better? How are we articulating that vision? How are we supporting our leaders in being visionary about that? I have an op-ed that should be published soon here that starts to pose some of these questions about how we think about this as a community and what does it mean to rebuild better. And I hope it's something that you all and others will further the conversation on, because I think our leaders are dealing in the moment. People are in crisis, and we need to create room and work with them to allow them to also look up and ahead about what it means to rebuild better while they're rightly focused on the crisis at hand.
Well, I love the idea that you both just talked about the rebuild better. So I'd like to throw our weight behind that and just a couple brief specific answers to what we're doing differently. And the one feels like an obvious thing to say, but we're moving, we're moving online. We're providing opportunities first to our employees. We were provided activism opportunities they could take from home. When we closed way back in March, it feels like 100 years ago. And we're doing the same thing for our customers and our community, providing online opportunities, both through our regular website, through our Patagonia Action Works website, which is our platform to connect our customers to our grantees, like my fellow panelists here today. And but there are a lot of things that haven't changed at Patagonia. We're continuing to hold the administration accountable. We filed an amicus brief last week with Columbia Sportswear to fight their clean, I believe it was clean air rollbacks. We are a founding member of 1% for the Planet, and we plan to stay committed to donating 1% of our total sales to small grassroots environmental groups working to solve the environmental crisis. We don't see that 1% of our total sales. We don't see that as an option. It's an earth tax that we pay for the privilege of doing business, because every jacket, every pair of board shorts we make has an impact. So as long as we're still making them, and we are still making them, we'll still be donating 1% of total sales to addressing climate change, clean air, clean water, clean soil.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna actually take an audience question here in the Q&A just quickly, because we do have a couple other questions to get to before we really go into full Q&A, but it relates to actually something that Jon said about stimulus funds, that steering those stimulus funds toward, opening differently, opening new environmental healing projects could either be, it could become a polarizing issue, or it could become a bridge issue. And so this relates to actually the next question is, both in terms of that particular issue, but how can you, in your roles, what do you think is the most important thing in mobilizing your constituencies around advocacy? What do you think is the most important thing people can be doing, whether it's on this question of avoiding polarization with respect to steering stimulus funds or any of the other issues? How do you best mobilize your constituency? What should people be doing, particularly in this moment, and how can they be doing it?
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to go first. We've got a kind of rotation going here, so I'll keep it going. You know, for us, that comes down to two things, organizing and values. We invest in people who then invest in people through organizing. And that's where we think change comes from. Elections are a form and an opportunity for organizing. Advocacy is an opportunity for organizing. It's connecting people and to issues and doing it based on their values. You know, I heard a great quote from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez the other day where she said, an organizer doesn't get mad at the people they're trying to organize when they don't join their movement. They ask what they did wrong and how they can do better. And that's the spirit that we have to bring to our advocacy and to our organizing, is that it is our job to find the values that resonate with people and connect them to our issues. We've seen the way that people are taking solace in nature and recharging through nature right now. That you can't have a conversation these days without talking with people about what it means to see blue skies and the mountains clearly. We know that a legacy for our children has always been one of our strongest climate change messages. And that is probably more true now after this pandemic than ever before. Those are values. They are not an alphabet soup of programs and policies. And I think that's incumbent on us to speak to values and to reach people through values. I'm from the Midwest. You know, my family are probably voters of a different persuasion than me. I'll just put it that way. I've never met a group of people more family-oriented and more tied to the land than my family of farmers. How do I connect with them on the values of that? How do we bridge that divide? That's on us as advocacy organizations to do that.
Donna Marco, take that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think Kelly's absolutely right. I think, you know, there are multiple paths you can take here. And I think, you know, Jeff started this off by talking a little bit about despair for the world. And I think, you know, that despair is certainly warranted in some respects. But at some point, we got to put our despair aside and we got to organize. We got to create great policy that achieves the objectives that we want to see. If we want to see renewable energy power the grid, if we want to see the grid of the future and transportation infrastructure, and we want to see wildlife corridors that protect habitat and species, and we want to see great use of our water resources so that we serve more people with less, then there's no alternative than to get out there and do the work that is in line with those objectives. I will tell you that as I've sat on some of these committees around where these funds are going to be directed once these packages are approved at the federal level, you know who's not absent is the oil and gas industry. You know who's not absent are those people in the coal industry. All of them now have their hands out looking for stimulus dollars, and they know exactly what they want. And so it's incumbent upon us, not just as organizations, but as individuals, to engage in the forums where decisions are made. Right now in Colorado, that means a couple of different places. One is the Air Quality Control Commission, which is really about to be really engaged in this long conversation about how we approach climate. And I think we need the folks that are on this phone and the people that you know and the people in your networks to get engaged in these issues. And I would just say, as a final comment on this, that yeah, there are a lot of polarizing issues out there, but in Colorado, climate is not one of them. Huge majorities of Coloradans support aggressive action on climate, and that includes virtually every single Democrat, vast majorities of independents, and about half of Republicans. So I think, yeah, it's true that that polarization is what gets the attention, but people in Colorado are pretty united around wanting action on climate. And so I would urge people here to engage, to continue to support the organizations, whether it's with Patagonia, whether it's with Conservation Colorado, whether it's with Western Resource Advocates or other organizations. Stay engaged, get engaged, support them, and take those actions.
Mark, did you want to address this any further, or I'm going to move on to a new topic, a little bit of a new topic? You're on mute.
Yeah, John took my answer, so well done.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I want to, since the Environmental Affinity Group and the Community Foundation is a large part of our mission is indeed working on philanthropy and connecting philanthropists to a variety of different issues and mobilizing resources. How do you think philanthropy is changing in this moment from your perspective, given, we have an unknown economic future, we've got a huge and growing need for frontline basic human services, food and rent, while it's also, as we all know, an extremely important election year. And I know we say that every 4 years we say, or every 2 years, or every year we say, this is the most important election in our lifetimes. Yeah, and so what are you seeing in this environment, and what are you doing to adapt in terms of philanthropy and in terms of survivability of particularly the two nonprofit organizations, but also in the business world, in the Patagonia perspective? It's somewhat different issues, but not unrelated.
So I'll leave a lot of time for my friends in the nonprofit community, because I'm sure you guys have a lot more to say about it than I do. I know from our perspective, I mentioned we're committed to 1% of global sales going to environmental nonprofit groups. It probably won't surprise anyone. We expect those sales to be a bit lower this year, and so the pot we're pulling from is going to be a bit smaller, I suspect. And we're having conversations about setting more priorities than we usually do, and being a little more disciplined than we usually are. I think in our case, if I had to speculate, we'll be even more laser focused on climate giving, looking at groups who are solving the climate crisis, because in many ways that one issue has tentacles in just about everything else. And so I guess a little more discipline and a little more, although saying discipline makes us sound like we're just willy-nilly throwing money around, but thinking more about what is most important to us.
Kelly gets the last word on this subject. I think it is a great question, and I think in some respects it's too early to tell, Sue, and I suspect that the 50 people that are on this webinar have as good of an idea about what that looks like for them as it does for us. And so I think, you all are here because you're philanthropists, because you're concerned, because you care about the work and the organizations that are doing it. And, we're trying to have conversations with as many of those folks as we can to better understand how people are thinking about what they might be able to do in this year when they do have kind of, they're pulled in different directions. There is this critical and immediate need to respond on the pandemic, and people are feeling it in their communities. How does that impact conservation organizations specifically and nonprofits more broadly? I don't think we know yet. There's this critical, set of basic needs that need to be met, and people are stepping up in a lot of ways to address those. That I anticipate it's going to continue for some time to come. And so I think philanthropy is obviously key in our work on climate, for the work that Kelly's organization does, that we do. Patagonia is a key part of that. Many of you are. And we can't do that if we see a 30 or 40% decline in revenues, which is what a lot of conservation nonprofits are planning for, and what a lot of nonprofits that kind of aren't providing direct relief are planning for. If I think out to the end of this year in 2021, that's the key time for decisions around Colorado's climate plan. And we can't afford in any way for our organizations to not be engaged, and to be as engaged or more engaged than we've ever been before. And then I think the question comes to long term: what happens next year and the year after? How does philanthropy respond? And it's hard to ask folks to respond with more in an environment where there is less, or where there are multiple priorities. But I think we can't get caught in the same position we have been with the COVID pandemic. Is we have to prepare for climate now. It won't wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. And so my hope is that philanthropy responds.
Yeah, I'd echo what Jon said. We don't know yet. I think we're seeing, our approach has been to reach out, to connect, to communicate, to talk with many of you, get your advice, ask what you're seeing, what you think the world looks like, what does it look like for you, are your priorities changing? So far what we're hearing back is really, gives me a lot of hope. For the most part, our funding community has said to us, we are with you, we are there, we realize things might need to change. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think that's terrific, because like Jon said, the moment is not waiting. And 2021 makes me nervous. But what makes me more nervous, actually first, is the 2020 elections. On the one hand, I have never seen people more motivated in the span of a few weeks to really understand elections. And this opportunity and this moment in time. Wisconsin was a wake-up call and an opportunity. But we know that the one problem with elections is that election money always comes late. This is not a year that allows election money to come late, because we have to build multiple plans to win, and we have to test new things. So that's worries me, is that a lot of folks who engage in elections wait until, September, October. I've had major national players wait until kind of mid-October to decide. And we can't wait. We're doing experiments right now in the June primary. We're building plans to be involved in various situations. So I do worry about how particularly the progressive community waits on elections, when we know that the opposition does not. They invest in their infrastructure and their electoral systems on a year-round basis. And so I would encourage folks to think about whatever group you engage with, engage early and often, and help them be ahead of the curve. Help them have the resources to plan to win, because that planning is starting earlier than ever this year.
Great. Well, our last question that we had talked about was, how can we help? And I think you've already identified a lot of ways that we can help. One is, as philanthropists, giving, continuing to give, giving early, not waiting until the last minute, and continuing to, and voting, and all of those kinds of things that I think we know. But I'll give you one more shot at, is there anything that I didn't mention, or that you didn't mention, that you think that we should be doing, particularly regardless of the size of our philanthropy, whether it's big or small, that particularly this group should be doing sort of beyond those obvious things that we that you've already said. And then we're gonna so briefly, and then we're gonna go into Q&A. And I know some people have been asking questions and chatting through those functions, but we're actually going to promote everybody to panelists when we do that, so that we can actually see each other and people can raise hands and things like that. So any last words about how we can help, what you want us to do?
Well, I'll start this off. I think there are two key areas and opportunities that are happening right now that I think would benefit from additional thinking, investment, engagement. And so for me, those two are the process that's happening in front of the Air Quality Control Commission, where Kelly's organization, mine, several others are really collaborating to try and ensure that we get rules that are consistent with the science, that ensure that Colorado meets the reductions in carbon emissions that are necessary. There are places to engage on the Conservation Colorado website, on our website as well. There are a variety of other organizations, Environmental Defense, Sierra Club, NRDC, the Nature Conservancy are all engaged there. I would say investing in those organizations to ensure we get a good result on those climate packages are critical. And then I think the second thing is, you know, a lot of you are community leaders. You're very engaged in your own communities and are effective advocates. As we look at some of these dollars that are going to be spent, the federal dollars, there's going to be opportunities to engage at the local level with your local elected officials, with state elected officials, to ensure that our congressional delegation is really backing plans that help us rebuild better and that ensure that we're building for the future rather than investing in the economy of the past. I think there are opportunities to get engaged there, and I would urge people to do so.
Mm-hmm. I'll give Mark the last word on this one. You know, I would say double down with us. Double down on what you've been doing. So many of you have been doing. It's working. You know, you have helped us build a Colorado leadership story and a model of success, as Jon talked about, in leadership. Many of us have been building that over the last decade. And the story's just getting really good. We still have villains, we have heroes, we have conflict, and we have massive opportunity to see this over the finish line and really keep building this story of success. We have the gateway race to a US Senate majority. There is no majority without beating a certain senator. I'm not going to get down into the weeds per Sue's instructions. We can build a climate firewall in the state Senate. Many of you know that is the key place that determines how big and bold we can be on climate and other leadership. And we can build a firewall there in this coming election. We have an opportunity to have pro-conservation majorities for the first time ever in top oil and gas producing counties, county commissions, oil and gas producing counties in Colorado. That is unheard of. And we can lead the country on rebuilding better with the federal stimulus, leadership grounded in a carbon neutral economy. We can lead that and be a success story there. That's our Colorado story. That's our Colorado story of leadership. And we need it now more than ever. It is a source of hope. It shows the opportunity. And so I'd urge you to double down and keep doing what you've been doing, because we're right there on building that leadership story of success.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I hate following that up. And I will repeat what you said, and that's, you know, double down on what we're already doing. You know, we're on the right path here in Colorado. And as Jon said, you know, the folks on this call, you all are leaders in your community. And as such, you know, I invite you to join and invite your fellow business owners to join as well. Patagonia launched in 2018 an initiative called Time to Vote. Since 2016, we've closed all of our US operations on election day so that it's easy for our employees to vote. We look at it as a job benefit, that we don't have to choose between a paycheck and voting. We continued that in 2018, we're continuing it in 2020, and we're inviting employers. It doesn't have to be for-profits. Conservation Colorado and Western Resource Advocates can join us. Go to maketimetovote.org. And we don't expect our partners to join at the same level we're doing it. We don't expect anyone to shut down entire North American operations the way we do, but have a day without meetings. Provide hourly employees with a 2-hour paid lunch so that they have time to vote. It feels a little funny promoting it here in Colorado because it's already so easy for us to vote. But in as much as you folks are communities leaders, as Jon said, you have relationships with business owners, join us in making time to vote.
Great, thanks, Mark. Well, thanks to all of you. Well, thanks to all of you for your excellent responses to all of these questions. We're now going to start taking questions from the audience and making you all visible if you want to be on your video. So that's going to take a couple seconds, and let's keep our fingers crossed that the technology works here. So Hannah,
so everyone will get a notification that you've been promoted to a panelist. It will just take about 90 seconds. So stay with us.
People keep disappearing and reappearing. It's very exciting. So those of you who've been promoted, you can turn your videos on if you want to. You don't have to. But it's nice to see everybody. It's kind of weird doing this, talking to some blank boxes with names in them. Usually we do this in a room. How are we doing? So we got 22 to go. Okay.
This is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool to see everybody suddenly show up. Wow.
I need a bigger monitor.
I know. It's going to take 3 screens here. I thought we were going to lose a lot of people in this process, but wow, the technology actually kind of worked. I wish there was a select all button to be able to just do that with everybody at once.
Brooke fast.
That too.
Yeah, well, I can hear Brooke clicking away there, but all right.
While we're waiting, can I ask a question?
Yeah, who is that? Oh, that's
Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Everybody. Kelly already answered me in chat, but I'm wondering if our other panelists saw the documentary Planet of the Humans, and if you had a reaction. And if you haven't seen it, everybody should watch it. It's devastating. Don't watch it with your kids.
Okay, good to know. Planet of the Humans. No, Planet is, what was the name of it?
Planet of the Humans.
Yeah, Planet of the Humans. Okay, good to know. Okay. It looks like everybody made the transition over here, and we've got like all these people on video. Hi, everybody. Wow, cool. Okay, so, all right, so in the participant list, now wait a minute, where's the hand raising feature? It went away. So given that there's 46 people here, I don't want everybody to start talking, but Brooke, help me out here. Where's the hand raising feature? Where did it go?
So I think you have to click at the bottom on the participants tab, which is at the lower in the center, but on the left-hand side of those options.
Yeah, but it's not showing up in mine.
Oh, well, maybe it's showing up on mine.
Wait a minute, here, I got it.
Participants go up.
Okay, it's
And
here.
the raised hand moved.
I hear it. So I got it. So in the participant tab under the panelist column, you can raise your hand. So that would be probably the most useful way to do it. So I see one hand up. I'm going to call on Stephanie Dobby.
Good morning. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful. I would like to bring in the role of education in all of this. And I'm wondering if our panelists could answer the question, if you had to prioritize educational initiatives in terms of audience or content or context, what would you prioritize in the next year or two?
Oh, good question. I'm happy to jump in. Education is critical. Obviously, a number of years ago, we made a decision to prioritize education and leadership development within the Latinx community in Colorado, and developed our Protégete program. Protégete means protect yourself. And we have a Promotores program, which is our leadership development program. It was originally geared towards an adult audience, particularly women, as you can imagine. We've expanded that into schools and now have partnerships with high schools as well for our Promotores program. And it's a curriculum, a leadership development and environmental issue curriculum that we do, and then we graduate the Promotores. We have over 200 now after a few years. And then we have comités, which are community councils that continue that work, and the Promotores set up comités, committees within their community, and continue the work on environmental advocacy, local community projects. So we've had a lot of success with it. It's near and dear to our heart. It's near and dear to many of you. Many of you helped us develop this vision. And so the potential for that is almost limitless in terms of the ability to keep growing that and expanding that leadership and education.
John, I can't hear you, but I see your lips moving, but you're off mute, so.
Okay, how's that?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, I would say there's a short-term and long-term issue, Stephanie, that, right now we're coming up on election season. Our organization doesn't do elections, but I think we want to make sure clearly that young people and voters who are concerned about climate are voting, and there's a lot of education necessary in that arena. I think long-term, there are a whole lot of investments that need to be made, but young people don't need to be told that climate matters. They're really clear on it. If you look at kind of the sets of, when you look at polling data, young people know. They learn about it in school. They know it. They understand it. They believe in the science that's out there. So I'd say, short-term, really prioritizing those people that will be or can be voting for the first time is a critical educational segment.
Great, thanks. I can see that we've got two hands up, and I'm going to guess that might be about all the time that we have. Mark, unless you wanted to jump in on that question really quick. So Morgan was up first, so Morgan, go for it. Morgan McMillan.
Hi, everyone. I'm hiding from my homeschool students out on the front porch to ask a quick question related to education question about one of the most powerful, I think, economic messages that comes out against getting off of the oil and gas diet we're on is around the education revenue that comes from the state lands that we have, state and federal lands in the West. And what are some of the opportunities now that oil and gas is taking such a big economic dive to maybe think about diversifying what we're putting on federal and state lands to help diversify the revenue that's coming into education?
Great, thanks, Morgan. Kelly, John?
I guess where I would start is, we've built a lot of pieces, the important pieces of our economy and our educational system on a boom and bust system. And I think if anything, this demonstrates that using those kind of investments for long-term values doesn't make sense. So as we think about and rebuild our economy, we need to be thinking about what that looks like into the future. And I think these stimulus bills are a real opportunity on that, and getting our state leaders on board in an economy that is more resilient over the long term, that addresses these economic challenges that we see in the future, and that addresses the sets of growth industries where there are real opportunities. If you look at renewable energy, there are far more renewable energy workers in Colorado than there are in the oil and gas industry. And there are real opportunities to invest for Colorado to continue to be a leader and to ensure that we build a much more resilient economic cycle in the process.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add real quick is that our system of public finance in the state is completely broken. As so many of you know, conflicting constitutional measures, our property tax structure, our oil and gas taxation structure, it's taking us all for a ride and not serving us. And I'll put in a plug, if you haven't yet, check out the Bell Policy Center. Full disclosure, I'm on the board, but that, you know, we have large fiscal challenges in this state that unify all of the advocacy community, because we are all hindered in our ability to do better in our advocacy by the state's fiscal structure, and we're going to have to wrestle with that at some point.
Mark, did you want to weigh in on that one? Okay. All right. I'm going to turn to Jim Hooton with probably the last question. Jim.
Hi,
or is it Edie? It's Jim.
It's Jim. I'm a guy. But Edie is my wife. And actually, my question is related to her role in the state legislature. So just like we are looking for the states to take leadership on climate action from the federal level, a lot of communities in Colorado want to move faster than the state is moving on climate action. There's a group, Colorado Communities for Climate Action. And one of the ideas that's been in the legislature is community choice energy. The idea that cities should be able to contract directly for energy from renewable sources. And so without waiting for Xcel and Black Hills and the other monopolies to move at the speed that they're going to move forward with. So my question is, what's the position of the two panelists here on those bills, and the idea of community choice energy?
John, you want me to go first on this one? Well, first of all, say hi to Edie for us, and thank her for her work. She's a great champ on climate and clean energy issues in the legislature, and we very much appreciate her work. We are neutral on that particular bill of Edie's, but recognize the spirit and leadership in which she's brought it forward. And it's probably too detailed a conversation for the minutes we have left. The thing that we're focused on right now is building a policy and regulatory system in Colorado that John alluded to, that is really to scale to hit the targets that we know science tells us we have to hit. The reductions in carbon by 2030 and by 2050. And we need to build that structure at the state level in order to reach the magnitude of the problem in the time frame in which we need to meet it. The locals can play an important role in it, but we're really too late for kind of locals on their own really moving the needle. We need that state framework, and then local leadership is important. The locals can bring in a lot of opportunity there, but it really needs to be done within that larger construct. And so that's been our focus. It's why we've not engaged on Edie's bill, because we're focusing our efforts on that.
John or Mark, did you want to weigh in on that at all, beyond what Kelly said?
I think Kelly really hit the nail on the head. Our focus has been the most carbon reductions, the fastest, and whatever actions get us there the most quickly is the route we've taken, and that's why we've really tried to focus on an economy-wide set of strategies that get reductions across all sectors. that's really been where we focused. I think our organization similarly has been neutral on the bill.
Okay, my clock says that it's 10:30 and our virtual coffee has come to a close. So, but I do want to give our panelists 10 seconds for any closing thoughts or comments that you want to make before we say farewell and thank everyone for being here.
Thank you. Register, get informed, vote, tell all your friends.
Okay.
Thank you. What you're doing is working. Double down. Help us keep building this Colorado leadership story and rebuild better. And we're so appreciative. We would not have any of the last year's success without you all. And we won't do it in the future without you. So thank you. Thank you for all of your efforts and your early leadership and support.
I echo the thank yous. What all of you have done is support leadership on climate. Colorado's at the forefront of that, and it's not possible without you. So thanks. Keep doing it. Double down.
Hey, well, I think we managed to get through this without any technical difficulties, and which I would consider to be a grand success in this moment. So I really want to thank our panelists and for all of you for joining us for our very first EAG webinar. We're going to have more. So just be on the lookout for the next one, which is going to be Friday, June 5th, and it's entitled Mapping Sustainability Efforts led by Boulder County and its municipalities. More on that coming soon. I think that's in the chat, perhaps, so take a look there. Be on the lookout for a survey, which is going to be sent, I think, in the next half an hour to an hour. So we really do want your feedback because, you know, in this new moment in time where so much is going online and going virtual, that we want to know what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. And we really encourage you to stay engaged with the work that all of these organizations are doing and the work of the foundation. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Community Foundation Boulder County has a COVID-19 fund that has raised about $1.5 million in a very short period of time, and we're pushing that money out to frontline organizations. And while that isn't specifically an environmental issue, it is a critical pandemic issue, and it's an important part of what we're doing. We're also continuing the other work we're doing, like the Environmental Affinity Group and the other programs and work that we're engaged in. But a lot of effort going forward is going to be recovery. So again, thank you so much. And if you're not a member of our Environmental Affinity Group yet, we encourage you to be a part of that. You can contact Peggy Driscoll or Brooke Kale to get involved in that. So with that, I'm just going to close and thank you very much to Peggy and to Brooke and to our steering committee for doing both the planning and the technology work to actually make this happen and make it be smooth and successful. And of course, again, to our panelists. So thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.